Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, I'm your streamer, and this is a stream all about working on Django applications and Python. So we're doing a lot of web development, and we're going to jump right into our project tonight, which is a fairly new project. If you've watched previous streams, you might notice there's a difference in gear here. I'm switching microphones to hopefully help improve the audio quality, but I got to get used to having a mic right in front of my face. So this is going to be an adjustment for me. We'll see if it goes okay, but hopefully that's all I need to say on that subject. Tonight we're going to be working on user accounts, and we've got a new app that I've been building. It's going to be a homeschool tracking service because I have children that are doing homeschool, and I would love for them to be able to use a tool that I build to help make our lives here at home easier. But we're just in the very beginning stages of it. So in the last couple of streams, we've been setting up the very basics of the repository, setting up a couple of basic tools to get us started. And today we're going to continue down that road of what we need to do. So the subject that we're going to work on today is a tool called Django allauth. And let me try and see if I can get up the documentation for that so that we can stare at that together. Django allauth is, as it might sound like, a tool that allows you to authenticate with a website using a variety of techniques. Stuff like Google sign-in, Facebook sign-in, all sorts of different providers, they call them. And you can see the massive list of providers over on the side here. And there are many, and many kinds. And we're not going to use any of them. So that's a little weird, but there is a good reason why I'm doing this, because Django allauth makes it possible to switch up the default user model that's in Django so that you can provide a different kind of login mechanism. If you have used Django before, maybe you followed the Django tutorial, you will find that the default user account uses the conventional username and password combination. And that's fine. I'm not going to knock that. It works for a lot of sites. But what I've noticed from many services these days, if you're not doing a social auth kind of thing, like a Google, like a Facebook, any of those sort of services, then you might use an email address as the username. And that is my plan for this app. The primary person that I'm trying to satisfy for this application is actually my wife, and I asked her how would she want to sign in on an app. And she told me very clearly that she would prefer to use her email address as the username so that she could get going that way. And since she's the person I'm trying to make happy in this process, that is exactly the path I want to take. And it's the path I'd probably want to take anyway. So Django allauth provides an ability to do that, and we're going to get walking down that path tonight. I don't know how far we'll get down that path, but the goal here, we're not doing any styling yet. We're not at any sort of stage. So all I want to do is be able to create these accounts and add the automatic forms that will be generated by Django allauth, so someone could sign up and get going with the service immediately. Before I deploy that, I want to probably gate that stuff, because at this very early stages, I don't want a bunch of random people signing up for a service that they can't use. I do want to avoid spam, all sorts of stuff like that. But we're not going to get to the gating part tonight. I'm just not going to deploy this feature until it's ready to my level of satisfaction. So let's get started with the actual project code and the integration, and see what we can do, shall we? The thing that I would like to follow is a post by Will Vincent, and Will is a prolific member in the Django community and has written something that I'd like to just follow his tutorial almost to the letter, because he's basically thought through all the details that we care about. And so thank you, Will, for doing that. It's really cool that you put that together. We won't have to do everything because I've already started a Django project, but some of the stuff about adding a custom user model and some of the actual settings that we need for Django allauth, the details are here. And he's already done this in this mode where it will use an email address as the user account. So it is exactly in line with what we want. So I brought up his post here. You can go to his website, wsvincent.com, and find out more. I guess before I get too far into this, I do want to say that there's plenty of ways to follow me and keep up with me. If you want to check out the past episodes, I post them all up on YouTube at Matt Lehman. You can search YouTube for Matt Lehman. I should show up, and you should be able to find me that way. Also, there's a link above to, or not a link, but a URL to my website where you can sign up for an email list where I write about technical stuff like Django, like Python, if that's interesting to you. I do have a Patreon account. If you've been following along and are able to support me financially, that would be awesome. I do want to thank Mark and Patrick and Dylan for their current support as my Patreon patrons at this moment. So without further ado, let's jump into this and see what kind of damage we can do on the project tonight. So I'm looking at this post, and he starts off with a setup to get a project going. And we've already done all that, as I said, and we've seen this status page, and he creates a Pages app, and I'm not sure I'm going to do that part. I think he might mostly do that to like give a home page to start with, and that's not necessarily what I'm interested in from the get-go. And I'll take a link, this link, if you want to follow along. I'll drop it in the chat so you can check that out yourselves. And if you want to look at a different piece that I'm not currently looking at the moment. But the thing that I want to get to is this starting bit here about having a custom user model. I want to talk through why you'd want to do this or not do this. If you take a look at Django in its default setup, it comes with a user model that you can use. That user model has standard sort of attributes like username, email, password, these sort of fields. Although passwords is not, Django's not dumb enough to store passwords in plain text in the database. It stores hash values of that, so it's got the security to back you up, but it does have fields that you might care about. The downside of using the built-in user model is that by default it is not meant to be extensible. So if you want to use a different version of the user model and add to it, you have to walk down a slightly different path. A path that is well documented. It's just that one that you need to know about first before you get there. And it's not something that's presented right up in your face in the tutorial because it's a bit more of an advanced feature and you may not want it. So let's talk about why would you even want a custom user model? Initially, you probably don't. Initially, the default user model will serve all of your needs. The reason I suggest creating a custom user model is that in the future, as your project gets farther along, you might find some kind of data attribute that you want to add that needs to be accessible, is related to a user, and would be used on basically every page. An easy place to attach that to is a user record, because that user a query to the user database table will happen essentially on every page load, so you're guaranteed that that's going to be there. The danger of that, if you go crazy with it, is you could have a user model that becomes, sometimes it's referred to as a God object, and that is a pattern that means that everything gets shoved into one place. It's like the junk drawer of software development. So, and it has too many responsibilities. So that is a potential danger of using an abstract, a custom user model with the abstract user that we'll see in a minute. But well used, the user model with a couple of extra pieces of data can serve you very well. So if you follow and use the built-in user model, that's harder to take advantage of. And so we want to get, before we get deep into the system, and get stuck with the Django built-in user model, it would benefit us to have our own, so that it will be extensible in the future. So we're going to follow along at these steps here to put users in a users app, just like Will has done here. I am going to tweak things along the way because there's some decisions I've made about my project structure that I would like to be a little different. But this should serve us as a starting spot. And if you have any questions along the way, drop them in the chat. Just please be civil. I'm here to help work on a project, but also help educate people and let people know what's going on. So I want to be helpful to you, and if that's why you're joining in to learn with me. That's the goal. So let's start by making a users app. And as a reminder, as I like to often remind people, the Django project structure is a project is the top level thing, and the apps are kind of the components within the system. So this might be a little bit confusing if you came from a different tool where the entire thing is considered an app, but that's what the terminology is. So if you see this start app and you're wondering what I thought this project already started, it has. But app means a component. So we want to run the start app command, which is a template command that will just generate all the necessary scaffolding for us to start an app. And usually apps are named with a plural form conventionally. So we're going to call ours users. And that's should be identical at that point to the command that Will lists. Yep, start app users. So if we run that, and what we should see left behind is now we have this users directory right here. And this is where I would like to diverge a bit from path. And I want to think about this for a minute, because this structure, if we go down this path right now and I don't make any modifications, then every new Django app that I add to this will be a top-level directory in the root of my project. I am at the root of my Git repository right now. And that is okay, if my project never grows to a certain amount of size. But let's say there's a future where I have front-end kind of code, like maybe JavaScript, maybe Vue.js, or some framework where I want to sprinkle in some extra dynamic features. And then I'd have this scenario where I have a bunch of Python directories, and it's like, which one is my directory for my front-end code? And I kind of get a muddy picture there. So I think what I'd like to do is create a package that will hold all of my Python code minus a couple of files. Like I'm probably going to leave the project directory at the root here. But I think I want all of my apps to live in a single package. So in order to do that, we're going to need to make that package. So this project is called Homeschool. So we're going to make a directory. I'm going to give it the same name. And we also, to make it a Python package, we need to add a dunder init file. Dunder in Python lingo is like double underscore. So underscore init underscore. And that creates a Python package. And then what I want to do is then take the entire directory for the user's app and push it into Homeschool. So now I will have one Homeschool directory, and all of my Python code should live there. I think that's the choice I want to make. I'm gonna sit here and stew on that for a minute, because this is a choice that will affect the entire life of this. It's not undoable, but it's will be kind of annoying if I want to change it afterwards. And I think I'm okay with it. Yeah, because that's then in the future, let's say I have extra JavaScript code or something that needs to get built with a different build system like Webpack. we can save that whole discussion for another day, but then I could have a separate directory that is just, say, front end or something like that, that I could put in the top, and there'd be a pretty clear split between JavaScript and Python, which is nice. Okay, so that is going to require some changes, though. So over here, I've got my Vim terminal, and we need to check things out. So now stuff is in homeschool, and if we actually go into users, we can start to see what's really in there. And it includes a migrations directory with nothing in it. There's no migrations. Migration files are made when you add new models, but we don't have any models yet here. So there's an admin that, again, has nothing in it. And there's an apps directory that's listed here. This might need to change. I don't remember if the pathing stuff has to change. We'll play with that and see if it breaks when we put this all together. There's a models thing that we're going to use in just a minute, and a test directory that will probably a test file that will probably delete. Create a directory because I don't want to put all of my tests in a single file. I'd rather have a tests directory, and views, which we're probably not going to use for now. So let's hook it up. So the next thing to do is to add this new app to the installed apps area, and we'll add it like here. So I think this is where we need to say homeschool.users rather than just users. I think that'll be the difference. So if we go up to the settings file and go to installed apps up here, then we should be able to add homeschool users, because the installed apps, these should be Python modules. So Django has a contrib package that has different modules in it, or different packages, and so we need to use a fully qualified Python path that I can find. If we just did users, it wouldn't know where to look because the code is in homeschool. So that should be enough to start that, and then to confirm that, let's try and run thing. Okay, we don't have a domain, a root area yet, but everything still seems to be running, and the application didn't blow up. In fact, to confirm it, let's take this stuff out and see if this still goes. No, it's saying now it can't find the module. So this is proof that we have to reference the full Python path. I just wanted to give you that one example to show why it has to be set this way. Now, if you started and you don't like my choice of putting it all into a single directory, that's cool. You can follow just exactly what Will did and just put users and leave it there, and just have users be in your installed apps, and it's all good. So this is just personal preference, and it's one of the areas where I actually appreciate Django in this regard, because it's kind of flexible in that way. So if we come back over to the guide that he's got here, you can see he's got this other line. This is the line that's important. Django has this setting called auth user model that is the hook that it tells Django to use a different user model class. So we're going to use the Django contrib auth section, which I believe is already installed, but we need to put in this new setting. So I'm going to come down to where auth is with this auth password validators is probably the best place that makes sense. And I'm going to say right below here, I'll say auth user model. And we're going to give it a path to a model record that doesn't exist yet. So it's going to be homeschool.users.models. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. I'm sorry. It's going to use the app name model syntax. So I apologize, it's not actually Python pathing. Sometimes this catches me off guard, but that should do it. So each, let's bring it up so I can show you by staring at this. In the user's app, there's this file called apps, which has this app config thing, which gives this thing, this Django app, a particular name. And that name is users, as you can see. So it's kind of a shorthand to refer to models or apps not by their long names, but by the name that's given in the app config. And any model that resides in that app then becomes the dot, whatever that model name is after it. So we haven't created the model yet, but I'm going to call mine, and I'm actually going over here to fix it because I noticed a typo. It's going to be just user. He called his custom user, but I prefer just having the name user because it's shorter. So coming over to our users models area, we can then follow this section where we want to follow suit. We want to import the abstract user from Django, from the auth package where these users come from in the first place, and then derive from it as a subclass. And that is what will give us the definition. So the combination of the setting of auth user model and then actually having the model defined is enough to hook into the auth system to tell Django to use our model rather than the one that's already in place. So let's come over here, and we're actually not going to need this models import initially. So it's contrib, then auth, and then what was it? Was it models? Yeah, models, and then import abstract user. And we want to give it class of user, and the superclass is going to be abstract user. And we'll give it a doc string that says a custom user for user extension, just for extension. Okay, so having that in place should be enough to get that started. We are going to have to create a migration for this. So I guess I'll drop another note so we can remember what we've done here. We added an abstract user. That's will help me with show notes later, frankly. And he's got some stuff here for forms. I'm trying to remember why he created a different form. I think he's creating it just to show off having a username and email. We'll back up into that in a minute because we might not need it. So we're going to jump down to here where he's making a migration, and we'll make migrations for that, and then we're going to migrate our whole database. Now locally I'm using SQLite. Eventually I'll switch that to Postgres, but it's not super important today. When the stuff gets deployed to Heroku where things are living, it is using a hobby level Postgres database, which has something like, permits like 20,000 rows, which should be plenty for the time frame that we need to get the app up and running. But just know that I have opted not to change the database yet, but I will in the future. So I haven't really talked much about doing migrations, but this will be the start of that. So we're going to come over here. We're going to say Python manage make migrations. And as you can see, it created our first initial migration, which just contains the user model. So now if you run manage.pymigrate, there's a bunch of migrations because I actually haven't run them at all for this local setup. So it ran all of the stuff from the Django apps that are built in, as well as our user's initial migration here. Okay? And if we fire things up and take a look back at the server, I still don't have I don't think I have created a super user yet. Good question. let's check it out. So I'm going to actually switch around and go to the shell. And we're going to, from homeschool, this is the other consequence of me putting everything under a namespace or under a single package, is I sort of get the benefit of having a namespace. So all of my custom code, my Django code, will be in this homeschool package, which will give a very clear delineation between what is coming from Django or third-party stuff and what is my own actual code. So from homeschool users models, import user, and I don't think there can be any users here because we didn't run migrate command. So this should be count. This count should be 0 if I run it. Okay. So we're going to run a command that will give us a superuser. And I believe the command is create superuser, but I'll just double check. And all that's going to do is give us something that we can log into locally in the admin in this SQLite database. So the actual username and password does not need to be secret. I can share it with you. It doesn't matter because you can't access it because it's on my machine. And it's throwaway data. So manage.py create superuser. And I'm going to say the username is Matt and nobody@nowhere.com. I don't know why I tend to use that, but that's the email address. And is it going to accept that?